In school, we were taught information, not wisdom. We memorized formulas and dates, but we were rarely shown how to govern our impulses, how to remain unmoved by distraction, or how to persist when comfort calls us away from our purpose. Yet in life, it is not knowledge alone that carries us. It is the quiet strength of self-discipline, not as a rule forced upon us, but as a virtue chosen from within. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus, born a slave, found freedom not through rebellion, but through mastery of his own mind. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, ruled not just an empire, but also his thoughts and emotions. These 10 lessons are not loud or glamorous. They are the silent foundations of an unshakable life, and they remain hidden to those who only seek the surface. 1. Practicing self-control before reacting, the discipline of delaying messages. In a world of constant noise and digital immediacy, one of the greatest acts of discipline is this: not reacting right away. Every time your phone buzzes with a new message, a subtle war begins inside your mind. Your fingers itch to check, to respond, to engage. But this tiny moment, this fraction of a second, holds immense power. For the Stoics, discipline wasn't just about dramatic sacrifices or grand endurance. It was about learning to govern your inner world, especially in the most ordinary of situations. Delaying your reaction is not weakness, it's wisdom. By choosing not to immediately check every message or notification, you are telling yourself, I am in control, not my impulses. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In our age, the outside events are not invading armies or political upheaval. Often they are pings, alerts, and texts demanding our attention. Set times to check your messages. Mute your phone during deep work. Pause before replying to a provocative comment. This is not avoidance, it is self-mastery. The goal is not to cut off communication with the world, but to prevent the world from constantly interrupting your clarity. Think of your attention like a sacred fire. Every distraction is a gust of wind threatening to extinguish it. When you delay checking your messages, even by a few minutes, you are preserving that fire. You are creating space, mental and emotional space, to respond rather than react. This isn't just about productivity, it's about freedom. The Stoic doesn't chase every impulse. He doesn't let emotions hijack his dignity. He pauses, he reflects, and only then he acts. To choose when and how you respond is to reclaim your time, your focus, your inner peace. Reflections. What if the next time a message arrives, you didn't respond right away? What if you waited 5 minutes or 10 and asked yourself, is this worthy of my attention now? Am I in a state of mind to respond wisely? These small acts of delay become the roots of a deeper discipline, and that discipline in time becomes unshakable character. True power is not in the instant reply, it is in the deliberate pause. 2. Training yourself to live with temporary discomfort. Focus on one task with full awareness. In an age of speed, convenience, and instant gratification, one of the most radical things you can do is this: stay with discomfort without running away from it. The Stoics believe that the path to wisdom and inner strength is not paved with ease, but with the willingness to endure discomfort, especially the kind that challenges the mind. Temporary discomfort is not an enemy to be avoided, it is a teacher. In today's world, discomfort often takes the form of boredom, frustration, or the difficulty of focusing on just one task. We hop from tab to tab, app to app, conversation to conversation. Our minds are scattered, hungry for novelty but starving for depth. But discipline, True discipline is forged in those exact moments when you choose not to escape. When you stay with one difficult task and resist the urge to check your phone, scroll social media, or open a new browser window, you're doing something extraordinary. You are building a mind that can endure, a mind that does not flee from difficulty, but breeze through it. Focus is not just about productivity, it's about reclaiming your mind from the chaos. When you sit with one task, even as your body resists, even as your brain seeks stimulation, you are choosing mastery over indulgence. You are saying, I don't need to be constantly entertained. I am capable of depth. This practice rewires your brain. It strengthens your character. And most importantly, it reconnects you to the present moment. The Stoics were not afraid of discomfort because they saw it as an opportunity to practice virtue, patience, endurance, clarity. In the same way, every time you return your focus to a single task, you are cultivating awareness. You are sharpening your mind like a blade. Train yourself to sit in the discomfort of monotony, to finish the page, to write the sentence, to solve the problem without the rush to escape. That resistance you feel is not a signal to flee, it is a signal to grow. Reflection. What would happen if you chose to stay with one task, fully present even as your mind begged to wander? What strength would you discover in staying still amid the noise? Stoicism teaches us that comfort is not the goal, virtue is. And virtue is born in the quiet crucible of sustained attention. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is your invitation to grow stronger, wiser, and more fully alive. 3. Delaying gratification for long-term purpose. Train yourself to stay in the present moment. In a world wired for speed and reward, learning to delay gratification is an act of quiet rebellion and profound wisdom. The Stoics knew that what tempts us most is not always what serves us best. Our desires whisper promises of comfort, pleasure, and relief now, but wisdom teaches us to ask, at what cost? Delaying gratification is not simply about self-denial. It is about choosing what matters most over what feels good in the moment. And that choice, though often subtle, is the foundation of self-discipline. When we train ourselves to delay gratification, we are not punishing ourselves. We are guiding our energies toward a life of deeper meaning. But how do we do this? In an age where everything is one click away, how do we resist the pull of instant pleasure? The answer lies in presence. The more we anchor ourselves in the present moment, the less power our cravings hold. When we are fully here, not fantasizing about future rewards or escaping into fleeting pleasures, we gain clarity. Cravings often live in our imagination, in the stories we spin about how much better things will be once we indulge. But in the now, there is only breath, thought, and intention. Here we can observe our urges without acting on them. We can let them rise and fall like waves without being carried away. To delay gratification is not to postpone joy forever. It is to realign joy with meaning. Instead of seeking a dopamine hit from a social scroll or junk food binge, we begin to derive joy from commitment, focus, and progress. We begin to understand that discipline itself is a kind of freedom. The Stoics didn't deny the pleasures of life. They simply refused to be enslaved by them. They saw pleasure as something that must follow virtue, not lead it. When you delay gratification, you are saying, my goals, my growth, and my character matter more than this fleeting moment of comfort. This is the essence of Stoic self-mastery. Reflection. How often do we choose the easy pleasure now, only to regret it later? And how would our lives change if instead we chose the harder path, one that leads to real fulfillment? The ability to delay gratification is not just a habit, it's a way of living with intention. When you master the moment, you no longer chase pleasure, you create purpose. 4. Creating rules for yourself and sticking to them. How to break the cycle? Build a calm and focused environment. Discipline begins not with external enforcement, but with internal governance. The Stoics understood that a truly free person is not the one who does whatever they want, but the one who governs themselves according to principles they choose deliberately. Creating personal rules and upholding them is a quiet act of strength, one that separates those who drift from those who direct. But let's be honest, we often break our own rules, not because we're weak, but because the modern world is loud. Notifications ping, screens glow, conversations buzz. The noise is endless, and in that noise, our own voice, our intention, is drowned out. We don't need more willpower. We need a better environment. Stoicism teaches that virtue thrives not in chaos, but in order. So if we are to honor the commitments we make to ourselves, we must create a space that reflects our seriousness. That is where calm, intentional environments come in. Imagine this: a desk with no clutter, a phone placed out of reach, a block of time protected from interruption. This isn't romantic minimalism. This is a battlefield where you give your better self a fighting chance. When the outer world is quiet, your inner voice becomes stronger. The rules you've set don't feel like burdens anymore. They feel like a sacred rhythm. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations not about conquering the world, but about conquering himself. He was a Roman emperor, yet he understood that true discipline is forged not through command, but through clarity. And clarity begins in the spaces we choose to inhabit. So instead of forcing yourself to keep every rule by sheer effort, ask, have I created a space where my rules can live? You can't expect a plant to grow in toxic soil. Likewise, your discipline cannot thrive in an environment filled with distractions, noise, and temptation. Create rituals, clear your space, protect your time like it's your most sacred resource, because it is. The more you honor your environment, the more likely your rules will evolve from something you try to follow into something that naturally guides you. Reflection. Do your surroundings support your inner goals or sabotage them? Before blaming yourself for lack of discipline, look around. Order is not a luxury. It's a necessity for anyone on the Stoic path. When you shape your environment with intention, your environment will shape you in return. 5. Staying consistent. Even when no one is watching. How to break the cycle. Practice the principle of direct action, prohairesis. There's a quiet test of character that happens when the cameras are off, the doors are closed, and no one is watching. Will you still do the right thing? This is where most people stumble. It's easy to be disciplined when someone's holding you accountable. But true Stoic discipline reveals itself in solitude. The Stoics had a term for this inner autonomy, prohairesis. Epictetus taught that this is the only true possession we have. Our ability to choose our responses, our actions, our character, regardless of what's happening around us. It is the sovereignty of the soul. When no one is watching, prohairesis is what remains. And that is why consistency, especially in private, is not a small thing. It's everything. Let's be real. Modern life is performative. Social media trains us to act only when there's an audience. Validation comes in the form of likes, shares, and applause. So we unconsciously begin to outsource our discipline to the eyes of others. But this is the opposite of Stoicism. The Stoic doesn't act to be seen. The Stoic acts because it is right. When you wake up early to write, even though no one will read it today, you're training prohairesis. When you stick to your healthy habits, even though no one is keeping score, you're strengthening your core. When you do your best work, even though your boss will never check it, you're becoming someone that you can trust. That's the real goal, isn't it? To trust yourself. And you don't build self-trust by performing. You build it by quietly keeping promises when no one's looking. One way to strengthen this is by embracing direct action, not thinking about how your actions appear, but simply acting from principle. The less you rely on external rewards, the more you build internal resilience. Epictetus didn't say, "Do what's right if others appreciate it." He said, "Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but want them to happen as they do, and your life will go well." That includes when recognition doesn't come, when it's just you, your decision, and your integrity. To maintain consistency without supervision, you must shift your motivation from outcome to identity. You do what you say you'll do, not because someone's watching, but because this is who you are now. A person of action, a person of honor, a person who doesn't need applause to stay committed. Reflection. Who are you when no one is watching? That is your true self. The Stoic doesn't depend on praise, punishment, or presence. They rely on prohoresis, the power to choose rightly, quietly, and consistently. In a world obsessed with performance, choose inner consistency. Let your private actions speak louder than any public praise ever could. 6. Valuing time as you value life. How to break the cycle. Master emotion through the practice of rationality. If someone were to steal your wallet, you would feel angry, violated, perhaps even panicked. But what if someone steals your time? An hour here, a day there, a year lost to mindless scrolling, trivial drama, or ungoverned emotions? Most people won't react. Why? Because we've been conditioned to think that time is renewable. But it isn't. Time is life, broken into moments. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And perhaps the most tragic part is that we waste it not in joy, but in turmoil, emotional overreactions, self-pity, grudges, and aimless worry. These are the true thieves of time. Learning to value time as a sacred currency is at the core of Stoic discipline. The Stoics believe that while we cannot control the length of our lives, we can control the quality of how we spend them. And quality begins with clarity. Clarity of mind, emotion, and intent. But what clouds our time? Our emotions. Reacting impulsively to criticism, exploding over minor inconveniences, drowning in regrets. These emotions chew away at our minutes and hours, leaving us drained without purpose. This is where Stoicism offers a sharp but liberating solution. Reason must lead emotion, not the other way around. When we train ourselves to pause and reflect before reacting, we reclaim our time. When we respond to stress with logic instead of panic, we extend the peace of our lives. When we prioritize reflection over rage, clarity over chaos, we begin to own our minutes again, not waste them. Practicing rationality does not mean denying emotions. It means giving them their proper place. The Stoic asks, is this feeling useful? Is this thought leading me closer to virtue? Is this reaction worth my finite hours on earth? These are not philosophical luxuries. They are essential tools for survival in a world that demands your attention at every turn. One of the most practical ways to begin is to build the habit of emotional journaling. Each time you're angry, frustrated, jealous, or sad, write it out. Not to vent, but to understand. Ask about what triggered this. What was under my control? What narrative am I telling myself? This simple process builds the muscle of reason over reaction, the very heart of Stoic power. Another powerful tool is the evening review. At the end of your day, reflect. Where did I let emotion control me? Where did I pause and respond with clarity? What would a wiser version of me have done? With consistent practice, this becomes more than just an exercise. It becomes a lifestyle of lucid self-possession. A way of living where every moment is lived on purpose, not wasted on impulse. Reflection. Time is not just a resource, it is your life, measured second by second. To waste time on emotional chaos is to surrender pieces of your soul. The Stoic path is not emotionless. It is emotionally intelligent. It invites you to master your feelings with reason, and in doing so, to reclaim the only treasure you truly own, your time. 7. Separating wants from needs. How to break the cycle, limit time and curate content wisely. One of the greatest illusions in the modern world is the belief that more is always better. More comfort, more entertainment, more stimulation. But as the Stoics understood over 2,000 years ago, the path to freedom is not through addition, it is through subtraction. In a society addicted to endless consumption, separating what we want from what we truly need has become an act of profound resistance. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it." In other words, discipline doesn't mean denying yourself joy. It means filtering out the noise to recognize what truly matters. The Stoics trained themselves to examine every impulse, every craving, asking, is this essential? Or is this simply a want masquerading as a need? In today's world, our wants are no longer born within us. They are manufactured. Social media, marketing algorithms, influencers, they all conspire to inflate our desires. You didn't need a new gadget, a vacation to Bali, or a productivity app until it was sold to you. The more we consume, the more confused we become about what fulfills us. And so, the distinction between necessity and novelty gets blurred, weakening our inner clarity. To counteract this, the Stoic must become a curator of their own mind. You don't have to renounce the digital world, but you do need to limit your time within it and carefully curate the content you allow in. The question is not just, is this interesting, but rather, is this helpful? Does it move me toward virtue, strength, and peace? One practical way to begin this discipline is to set clear digital boundaries. Limit how often you check your phone, especially during moments of rest or solitude. Unfollow accounts that feed envy, fear, or comparison. Choose long-form, thoughtful content over rapid, shallow consumption. Set a fixed time each day when you are unreachable, not as an escape, but as a return to yourself. By doing this, you create a mental space where your true needs, silence, clarity, reflection, focus, can re-emerge. And in that silence, you start to see that many of your desires were never yours to begin with. They were implanted, cultivated by others, feeding off your attention and peace. The Stoics also practiced voluntary discomfort, fasting, cold baths, walking barefoot, not out of self-punishment, but to remind themselves, I can live with less. I am not dependent on luxury. I am stronger than my cravings. This is where strength is forged, not in indulging every urge, but in mastering the urge itself. Reflection. A well-lived life is not built on indulgence, but intention. The Stoics knew that craving is a form of slavery. The more you chase what you want, the further you drift from what you truly need. Freedom begins when you can look at a desire and say, no, I am enough without it. In a world trying to sell you every possible want, the greatest act of wisdom is to choose only what nourishes your soul. Strip away the excess, and what remains is clarity. And in clarity, you find peace. 8. Using a daily journal to evaluate yourself. How to break distraction. Focus on your values and self-control. The Stoics believed that philosophy is not something you merely study, it is something you live. But how do we live deliberately in a world constantly pulling us in every direction? The answer is deceptively simple and immensely powerful. Daily self-examination. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, kept a personal journal not to impress others, but to keep himself aligned with his own principles. In his meditations, Marcus wrote not to publish, but to remind himself. He evaluated his actions, his emotions, his responses, holding his soul to a candlelight each night to see if he had lived according to the virtues he claimed to admire. This practice of journaling is not about productivity hacks or goal tracking. It's about accountability to the self, a conversation with one's inner moral compass. In our modern age, we're often too focused on external validation. We measure our worth by likes, performance reviews, or follower counts. But the Stoic journal does not ask, "What did others think of me today?" It asks, "Was I just? Was I patient? Did I act in line with reason, or was I ruled by impulse?" Distractions often arise when we lose sight of what we value. When we don't know what we're aiming for, we default to scrolling, avoiding, reacting. Journaling is the daily discipline that breaks this cycle. It becomes a mirror, not to flatter, but to reflect. And in that mirror, we begin to see our patterns, our unnecessary fears, our progress, our repeated mistakes. This seeing is the beginning of mastery. To focus on your values and regain self-control, you must write not to perform, but to discover. Write a few lines at night. What did I do today that aligned with my core values? Where did I act out of fear, ego, or anger? What would I do differently tomorrow? This quiet ritual will shift your energy away from chasing what you can't control, others' opinions, outcomes, chaos, and return you to what is always yours: your judgments, your choices, your character. That is Stoicism's deepest promise, that no matter how wild the world becomes, you can always find order within yourself. Reflection. Self-control is not a trait we are born with. It is a muscle we strengthen, and a journal is the weight with which we train it daily. Each entry is a small stand against forgetfulness, against drifting. When you write about your day with honesty, you reclaim authorship over your life. In a world obsessed with spectacle, journaling pulls us back to essence. And in that essence, you rediscover the freedom of living by values, not by moods. Let the page become your sanctuary and watch your inner life transform. 9. Refraining from complaining, even in hard times. How to break the habit. Prioritize rest as a form of discipline. The Stoics were not known for whining. In fact, they were known for their silence in the face of storms. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire through plagues, betrayal, war, and personal loss. Yet his writings rarely complain. Epictetus was enslaved and crippled, yet he taught with dignity and laughter. What did these men understand that we often forget? They knew this. Complaining is not catharsis. It is decay. It eats away at your sense of agency and inflates your sense of victimhood. And worst of all, it achieves nothing. The Stoic does not deny difficulty, but he refuses to amplify it with unnecessary lamentation. Complaints do not change the weather. They do not make pain disappear. They only teach the mind to wallow instead of act. But here's a critical insight that modern Stoics often miss. Chronic complaining is often the voice of exhaustion. When your body is depleted, your thoughts grow bitter. You catastrophize, you overreact, you whine, not because you're weak, but because you're tired. This is why prioritizing rest is not laziness. It is discipline. It is not Stoic to burn out and call it virtue. A fatigued mind cannot hold the line of reason. A restless spirit will reach for pity instead of clarity. If you want to master your emotions, you must honor the vessel that carries them, your body. Set limits. Say no when necessary. Sleep when you need it. Take quiet breaks, not as escape, but as preparation. The Stoic discipline is not only about cold showers and iron will. It's about knowing when to stop so that you can rise again with purpose. And most importantly, silence your complaints not with force, but with renewal. Instead of ranting about a hard day, take a nap. Instead of spiraling into self-pity, drink some water, go for a walk, or meditate. Rest, recover, return. These are the wiser responses. When you live this way, hardship loses its grip. You begin to face life not as a victim begging for mercy, but as a sovereign being choosing clarity. And in this, your silence is not repression. It's command, reflection. The Stoics knew that the greatest strength is often quiet, not because nothing hurts, but because strength chooses not to make pain louder than it needs to be. And when the body is rested, the soul can be still. So don't just grit your teeth through life. Learn when to pause. Learn when to sleep. Learn when to do nothing. Not as avoidance, but as cultivation. In this rhythm, you will find not just endurance, but grace, and the world will wonder how you remain unshaken. 10. Choosing the right path, not the easy one. How to break the habit. Set daily intentions rooted in Stoic virtue. At every moment of the day, we are presented with a choice, the path of comfort or the path of virtue. One whispers ease, applause, and instant gratification. The other demands effort, clarity, and often silence. And in between those two paths lies the essence of Stoic self-discipline. The courage to choose what is right, even when no one is watching and no reward is guaranteed. In the world we live in, the easy path has been dressed up beautifully. Clicks over contemplation, likes over legacy, pleasing others instead of holding true to one's principles. But the Stoics warned us long ago, if you seek tranquility, do less. Or more accurately, do what's essential, Marcus Aurelius wrote. And what is essential? That which is good, just, wise, and aligned with nature. To walk the path of virtue means saying no to the seductive pull of shortcuts. It means you will often stand alone while others take detours. It means resisting the impulse to betray your values for temporary gains. A lie told to avoid conflict, a promise broken for convenience, a duty delayed because it's unpleasant. And yet the truth is this: every small compromise to your principles chips away at your soul's integrity. Every time you choose ease over excellence, comfort over courage, your inner fortress weakens. The Stoics believe that your character is not formed in grand gestures, but in daily decisions. What you say, what you think, and what you refuse to do. So how do we train ourselves to choose what's right? By setting daily intentions aligned with Stoic virtues. Every morning, ask yourself, what kind of person do I intend to be today? Will I choose justice when it's inconvenient? Will I hold to reason when emotions stir chaos? Will I remain temperate in the face of desire and anger? By anchoring yourself each day in this moral compass, you build a habit not just of doing good, but of becoming someone who cannot be moved by flattery or fear. This is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need an audience to act with honor. The easy path is paved with comfort, but leads to regret. The right path is often uphill, but it leads to peace. Not applause from the world, but an unshakable calm within. Reflection. When you choose the right path over the easy one, you declare something powerful to yourself, that your life is not dictated by pleasure or fear, but by purpose. This is the very foundation of freedom in the Stoic sense. So tomorrow, begin again. Wake up not asking, what will I get today? But who will I be today? Let that answer guide every action, quietly, steadily, and with virtue as your compass. In that, no moment is wasted and no difficulty is in vain. Self-discipline is not a punishment, it is a liberation. It frees you from the tyranny of impulse, from the chaos of external noise, and from the false belief that comfort equals peace. To practice discipline is to live with intention, to act with reason, not reaction, to build strength not through control of others, but mastery of the self. The world may never teach you these principles, but life invites you to learn them every single day. Start small. Stay consistent. Let each act of discipline become a quiet triumph. For as the Stoics remind us, no man is free who is not master of himself. And true freedom does not shout. It breathes silently within a steady, sovereign soul.